Growing up, my dad was an AT&T supervisor for years, and matter of fact, he was the first black supervisor in history of AT&T. So I always grew up in sort of a Jackie Robinson type of family, and he used to get transferred around the Midwest. So by the time of April 8th, 1974, we're living in Milwaukee, and that's pretty significant, Tim. But you know about Milwaukee and Hank Aaron. That's where Hank got to start with the Milwaukee Braves, before they came to Atlanta. That was back in the early 1950s. And certainly in 1972, when we moved to Milwaukee, Hank Aaron was still a huge figure. So you've got that aspect. And then from being African American, all of us who, love sports or just love civil rights, everybody knew that Hank Aaron was this huge figure. So what I remember most about April 8th, 1974, we're at home in Milwaukee, the entire family. I've got two younger brothers, my mom and dad. And we had this big color television set down in the family room in the basement. So we're all set for this moment on NBC. Kurt Gowdy announcing the game, and then the TV doesn't work. The color TV is out, so we had to get this small black and white TV set. We put it up in the kitchen. Mom had fixed all this food because this was like a big event, for black people. It was similar to, I would say, April 15th, 1947, when a lot of black families gathered around the radio to hear the debut of Jackie Robinson. And we're all just sitting there waiting for this moment. And then when he gets up to bat and hits the home run in left field at the Orlando Ford County Stadium, I mean, the screaming was incredible in our little world just right there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in that kitchen, watching this moment. So I mean, it was very similar to, like, Jackie Robinson or any other major civil rights phenomena, certainly from an African American standpoint. Unfortunately, I did, and I'll tell you why I say unfortunately. I grew up in a household of sports fans. I mean, we were diehard sports fans. Now, I was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana, home of the University of Notre Dame, a little football team there. And then my dad, AT&T supervisor, got transferred to Cincinnati in '68. And that was the first year of something called the Big Red Machine. And me and my brothers, we used to live at Old Crosley Field and later at Riverfront Stadium. And we used to see Hank Aaron all the time come in with the Atlanta Braves. Matter of fact, first game ever played at Riverfront Stadium, 1970 June. Who's the first home run? Hank Aaron. And so we followed him all through our lives. And certainly by the time he came to Milwaukee and played for the Brewers, he retired. He didn't retire, but his last season with the Braves was '74. So he played with the Brewers in '75 and '76. And we used to spend a lot of time at County Stadium anyway. So I say, unfortunately, this was not the Hank Aaron that we saw 5, 6, 7, 8 years before at Crosley Field, right, at Riverfront Stadium. He was filling out that softball uniform of the Milwaukee Brewers very well. I'm trying to be kind. It was not a pretty sight. I mean, this was a shell of the old Hank Aaron, and it was kind of sad in a way to see him like that. But here's the thing that was so striking. Every single time Hank Aaron went up to the plate those last couple of years at Milwaukee County Stadium, he got a rousing standing ovation. He was just beloved in Milwaukee. And one of the things that Hank always told me, and with apologies to the Atlanta fans, his heart was always in Milwaukee. And it was a mutual love affair between the people of Wisconsin and Hank. And matter of fact, if I had to rank the all-time greatest sports heroes in the state of Wisconsin lifetime, I mean, you got Vince Lombardi's number one, and there's probably a tie between Bart Starr and Hank Aaron, depending on what day of the week it is. I was closer to Hank Aaron than any other reporter in history. That's like 40-something years. And the thing about this book, this is not a baseball book. It's not about Hank Aaron in 1965 hit so many home runs. 90% of what's in this book is totally fresh stuff, never before said in history, because Hank told me stuff he never told anybody. And one of the things when I put this book together, besides just the interviews I did with Hank through the years, I had these tape interviews, just hours of recordings, and I just went back, and book was written after Hank died in January of 2021, and I started listening to these tapes, and it was all these things that I had forgotten about or didn't even hear the first time around. One of which was this, and then this goes back to what you're talking about, the ending there. One thing that Braves fans will find fascinating, he didn't want to leave Atlanta. He actually wanted to finish his career with the Braves, but under one condition. He wanted to have a front office job after that 74 season in which he had hit 715, but he didn't like the way it was presented to him. That it was presented to him that they wanted to make him a professional Hank Aaron, just a figurehead. And anybody who knew Hank Aaron was not and would not be a figurehead. That really ticked him off, okay? So that's one reason he went to Milwaukee. The other thing that I was listening to this tape, and it was like it just went right over my head the first time. Hank was doing this particular interview, and I've got interviews that go back 30, 35 years. Hank said at one point in an interview that just went over my head. He said, yeah, so I went to Milwaukee, but I also had a chance to go elsewhere. And being a smart reporter I was, at least I did this, I said, where? And Hank said, well, I had a chance to go to Boston. And then he just kind of like went on from that to something else. And I guess I didn't hear that part the first time around. Like, whoa. And so can you imagine Hank Aaron with the Boston Red Sox with the Green Monster in left field, you know? And so anyway, that's what makes this book so fascinating. There's all these little tidbits that nobody ever knew before. And that's a good question because, and I'll put it this way, the Braves learned their lesson, that they weren't dealing with just some other guy. So right when Hank Aaron was about to retire in 76 with the Milwaukee Brewers, Ted Turner basically said, look, I want you back here in Atlanta in the front office, okay? And basically not as a figurehead, but you're in charge of baseball operations, farm director, that sort of thing. And the only thing was his brother-in-law, Bill Lucas, was also being hired, and this is what makes it so ironic. Bill Lucas became the first Black executive in history of Major League Baseball, and he was a general manager. So when Hank was first hired, there wasn't really an official role for him. It was sort of like he was one of those nebulous things that you see from time to time, even to this day, like the advisor to the president or that sort of thing. Okay, so Bill Lucas is the general manager. I mean, his brother-in-law. So the Braves, not only did they have the first Black executive in Major League Baseball, they had the second one. And they were the only baseball team that had two Black executives forever. Matter of fact, I mean, you can count on one hand the number of times that has ever happened, even to this day. So Bill Lucas, his brother-in-law, died tragically within a year or so after Hank came back to become this advisor. So then Hank Aaron became, for several years, the only Black executive of Major League Baseball, and he ran the Braves front office and the farm system, I should say. And one of the things that really got Hank very irritated, and rightfully so, everybody remembers that 14 consecutive division streak, the record 14 straight divisions that they won, starting in 1991, and with those great teams when they won the 5 pennants in the World Series in 1995. What really upset Hank was he didn't get enough credit for building the foundation of that team, because the bulk of that team, Tom Glavine, Dave Justice, Mark Lemke, Ron Gant, I'm sure I'm leaving some people out, they started in his farm system. And everybody kind of overlooks that. And then that's one of the things that Hank was very, very proud of. Well, Tim, I'm going to be quite honest with you. And I'm speaking for Hank. And I call myself in the book the Hank Aaron Whisperer. And I'm going to say what Hank would say about that. Hank would, and I'm getting chills thinking about this. Hank would be very satisfied and proud of the way the Braves have handled his legacy, even before his death. And it goes back to one person, Terry McGuirk. Terry McGuirk is the hidden success behind the Braves forever. Terry McGuirk was Ted Turner's right-hand man when Ted Turner first bought the team back in 1976, and he's been there ever since. And a lot of people have never heard of Terry McGuirk, and they don't know his power. And you know what? That's exactly what Terry McGuirk wants it. He's the one that runs this franchise. And I mention that because Terry McGuirk and Hank Aaron were like this. They were very, very tight. And Hank, to be honest with you, had problems with a whole bunch of people in that organization. As a matter of fact, he didn't trust a whole lot of people in that organization. And to be more blunt, the one guy that he did trust, the only guy he trusted, was Terry McGuirk, and for good reason, because Terry McGuirk took care of Hank Aaron very well. And you look at, if you go to Truist Park, you just look at the area where they've got the monuments and the salute to all of the former Braves. The most prominent thing in there that's documented is Hank Aaron. Everywhere, they've got a continuous video running of Hank Aaron talking about 715 and other stuff, his career. They got his bats and what have you. They've got these foundations that they have to continue a lot of this philanthropy. They've got the Hank Aaron Day every single year. They got this Hank Aaron Day, and even this year, even beyond the Hank Aaron Day, they got the celebration of 715, where they've got sort of like a Hank Aaron bobblehead now, that sort of thing. So the Braves, when it comes to that, they really have done pretty well. And you talk about naming the stadium after him. They do have the street named after him, of course. We all know about that. And I would not be upset if they didn't name it, Hank Aaron Field at Truist Park. I wouldn't mind that whatsoever. But as far as the stadium itself, we all know that everything is about money. All these stadiums are named, have these naming rights because people want to make big bucks. Who knows how much Truist Park is paying. This would be called Truist Park. But to name the field after him, I think that would be a good way to go. This was kind of rattling around my head for a long time. But what pushed me over the edge was, remember, Hank died in January of 2021. It's the summer of 2020. And I'm talking to Hank, and we're just shooting the breeze. And then Hank says, out of all the books that's been written about me, out of all the documentaries that have been written about me, let me back up a little bit. I kept bringing up things to Hank that I knew about that hasn't really been out there. And then that's when he started this all on his life. He said, of all these things written about me, he says, no one really knows the real Hank Aaron. That's the title of the book. like you do. You know a lot of stuff. And I said, well, we need to do a book here. And he said, yes, we do. We really need to do a book. He said, there's all the stuff that people don't know, even in spite of all the other stuff that's out there. So that was about in July of 2022. So I started going down that road, and we started preparing for this. And it was about 2-3 weeks into the process. And Hank calls me up, and this is the first time I really heard him sort of, I wouldn't say it was upset, but he was kind of, I could tell he was bothered by something. Something was bothering him. And he said, hey, I hate to tell you this. He said that, but I really need you to talk to my lawyer before we go further with the book. And I was like, okay. And I was like kind of nervous here because he wasn't really explaining what this all about. So I called up his lawyer, Alan Tenenbaum. And I said, hey, Hank told me to give you a call, Alan, and so on and so forth. And Alan was kind of nervous on the other end too. I was like, oh, geez, this is not good. He says, listen, he said, I just wanted to tell you, he says that Hank told me about the book. He says, but we can't officially say that Hank is part of this book or the family because the previous year in 2020, Alan said they had promised the author who was and I'm trying to think of the guy's name off the top of my head. He was a famous author that did a lot of projects of presidential biographies. And he said they had a handshake agreement that he would do Hank's official biography that would come out around this time, the 50th anniversary of 715. And by the way, going backwards here, I don't know if that ever came to fruition. Okay, but anyway, this is what I was told back then. And he said that so officially, we really can't let the family or Hank be involved with this. And there's a pause over the phone because I don't know where to go with this. So then Alan comes back and says, he says, but that doesn't mean that you can't do a book. He says, you know more about Hank than anybody. He says, there's nothing that stops you from writing a book. That's how it came about. And because of all the stories I already knew. And then it just clicked to me, you know what? I got all these recordings that I had, you know, and I was still interviewing Hank for other things. For instance, the last interview that Hank ever did with anybody was with me. And this was in the fall of 2020. I also work for the, I'm a Baseball Hall of Fame voter, and I also work for the Baseball Hall of Fame magazine. And they were omniscient. They said, hey, you know, can you do a story on Hank Aaron for us? I had done multiple stories on Hank Aaron through the years for the Baseball magazine, but we just wanted him to revisit 715. And I want to tell you, and it's all in this book right here, the beauty of Hank Aaron. In the 40 years I talked to Hank Aaron, every single time I talked to that man, he told me something I did not know. It was incredible. And so I called up Hank. I said, hey, you know, Baseball Hall of Fame wants me to do a story on 715. You know, so I know you've been through this many times before. I said, is there anything that you wanted to say that's never been said before? And it was incredible. I got all in there. And one of the things that was striking, so many things, but here's one of the most striking things. He was talking about, he said that it was getting very emotional. He says, people don't understand how tough that was for me in 73 and going into 74, chasing Babe Ruth's record, what I was facing, what I was under. And he says, on the road, he said, I could not leave my hotel room. So literally, I could not leave my hotel room. He says, it wasn't for Ralph Garr and Dusty Baker, two of his teammates, two guys that he treated as sons. He says, I would have starved to death. Because they would bring me food, you know, back to my hotel room because I couldn't leave. He said it was the worst time of my life. And then he said that there were many times that I thought I was going to die. He said that he said that it's like death was everywhere. And Hank has never said anything like this before. And so it's things like that you'll find in the book. But that's a long-winded way to tell you about how the book started. And then certainly when Hank died in January of 2021, that was unfortunate, obviously, for everybody. But from a book standpoint, the book still was in process of being done because I had all this other previous material in addition to the tapes. Yeah. You know, but here's the ironic thing. I asked Hank that point blank. I said that, how much of, he said, well, he said that the most peace he had was at the ballpark, was in the batter's box because he could concentrate. Okay. But at the same time, he said, you know, when you gave me that part of the answer, I said, so Hank, if you didn't have all that swirling around you, how many home runs do you think you could have ended up with as a career? He just kind of laughed. He said, 900, 800, 900, more than that. He said, I'm serious. You know what? I think he's probably about right. Hank Aaron, the life and legacy of the home run king. And here's the easy way you can get it. You go to www.therealhankaaron.com. Okay, it comes directly to me, and I will send you a personal autographed copy of it for $25.